From the Gert Boyle studio, it's OPB Politics Now for Thursday, May 8th. During his campaign to be Portland's next mayor, Keith Wilson had an idyllic pitch for the city's future. Now the mayor is up against his first major challenge, balancing the city's budget. With a huge funding gap, how does Wilson hope to confront the city's problems? Let's talk about it. Welcome to the podcast. I'm OPB Politics reporter Bryce Dole.
And I'm OPB Portland City Government reporter Alex Zielinski.
Alex, you recently sat down with Mayor Wilson and attended his State of the City address. Just tell us a little bit about what you noticed. How did he seem now that he's more than 4 months into the job?
Yeah, so the one word I heard during the campaign used most often to describe Wilson was earnest, and he's brought that energy with him to City Hall. He's still deeply optimistic and hopeful about the city's future and his ability to improve it. Here, let's show rather than tell. Here's Wilson responding to a question I asked, basically asking him what tells him that he's doing a good job right now.
I walk down the street, the hope, the excitement. I walk through the halls of City Hall. I walk through the second floor where our counselors are. I'm not one for setting up appointments. And I walk in and the doors open, the excitement is there. We have some very difficult conversations, but all of us are showing up right now.
So you can just picture him kind of shooting finger guns in City Hall and like sliding down a railing. I will say it's a contrast with sitting down for a conversation with a mayor who has been through many budget cycles. Our previous mayor, Ted Wheeler, he's been beaten down by budget battles at the city and the county, and he was more defensive and apologetic about his proposals when we talk about budget cycles. Wilson doesn't really have that baggage yet, so the way he's talking about these decisions feels a little through rose-colored glasses. I imagine it'll feel a bit different next year.
And how did he seem at the State of the City address? Like, what was his pitch? What was he kind of talking about?
State of the City address, he had that same kind of energy. He was really hopeful and earnest and making big promises for how he was going to solve the city's problems with his budget.
So let's take a step back real quick. What was the mayor's pitch on the campaign trail about how he would build the city's budget? Kind of what did he say about his own experiences and how he would bring that to building that budget?
Sure. I think now's a good time to remind people that Wilson is a longtime business executive. He ran a freight company for decades, so he knows how to run a business and deal with a big budget. And he talked about that often on the campaign trail. He also boasted about being able to tackle big challenges at his company, situations where he's been told over and over again no, but was still able to succeed. And he promised to bring that attitude to the city's big issues, the biggest one being unsheltered homelessness. The centerpiece to his campaign was a pledge to end all unsheltered homelessness by the end of this year, and doing that by quickly opening 15,000 shelter beds in that time. And he brought that laser focus to his budget. He's very committed to meeting his promise. It's clearly his priority in this spending package.
And let's dive into that spending package. It's $8.5 billion, which is a 4% increase from the current budget. But the city is also facing this $65 million funding gap that has been in the news a lot. Can you kind of break this down for us?
Right. So first, let's get into the deficit you mentioned. There are a number of things contributing to this. First, you might remember that during COVID, cities like Portland received money from the federal government under the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. And that was one-time money, not an ongoing revenue stream in any sense. But Portland used that money to prop up a number of programs that need ongoing revenue, like homeless shelters, for instance. So that's a piece of the deficit, trying to backfill that funding. The city also has seen property and business taxes slow down since COVID, and those taxes make up 75% of the city's revenue. And then there's stuff that all companies are dealing with, like rising healthcare costs for employees, like inflation. So a bunch of things. I should point out that this deficit is just in what's called the discretionary fund. Here's where I'll get into City Budget 101 really quickly. The discretionary fund is a pot of money that comes from property and business taxes, license fees, revenue from other governments, and it's pretty flexible in what it can be spent on. The discretionary fund makes up about 10% of the city's budget. And in this coming year, that fund is a little over $800 million. The other 90% comes from non-discretionary dollars. That's a pot of money coming from federal and state grants, utility fees, contracts, revenues that have to be spent on specific services. For instance, water and sewer bill revenues must be spent on water and sewer operations.
Right.
And so there's also a big gap in this fund, around $84 million, due to declining grants and revenues. It's going to be a challenging year.
Mm-hmm. And what does Wilson want to do to address this gap?
So cuts, the bummer stuff, in all roughly $26 million in cuts.
Wow.
Those are hitting 3 city bureaus the hardest. That's Portland Parks and Recreation, the Permitting Department, and Portland Bureau of Transportation. At Parks, he wants to cut a number of programs focused on maintenance, landscaping, trash pickup, bathroom cleaning, that kind of stuff. With transportation, it's cuts to sewer maintenance on streets, street cleaning and paving, street paving. And in permitting, it's a lot of staffing positions, about 68 total, people who process building permits and go out and evaluate construction plans. That office relies a lot on permitting fees and fees collected from these construction companies to pay the bills and pay salaries. And Portland has seen a serious decline in new construction in recent years, so the budget is tight. Here's how Wilson explained it to me.
I'd say the biggest sacrifice was in our Portland Permitting Department. We've fallen so far here in Portland, and our business activity and housing activity has really suffered. 5-6 years ago, we were building 5,000 homes. Today, our permitting is 800. Unfortunately, the biggest cuts are in permitting because the activity is so slow.
And I want to note that he's also proposing to expand some things. It's not just cuts. He wants to grow a homeless outreach program and the first response program called Portland Street Response, and also wants to maintain funding for some previously threatened things like the city youth sports program and gun violence prevention programs.
But if we can stick with those cuts for a moment, I know that a lot of county governments and city governments around the state are facing similar cuts because of budget gaps. Exactly. So how did the cuts in this gap compare to prior budgets that you covered when Mayor Wheeler was in office?
Yeah, it's funny, actually. This cut is, this $65 million is smaller than this current budget's previous cuts. The last Wheeler budget had, I think it was a $70 million budget cut. So it was a bit bigger. Again, it was caused by the same thing. I think a lot of these expiring ARPA funds, inflation, all of this stuff, it's definitely a lot larger than pre-COVID. I mean, also during COVID, it was like boom times. We had the ARPA funding. We were just patching holes left and right. But pre-2020, you'd be shocked if there was like a 20 million budget hole. So it's a different era.
And so let's turn back to the shelter plan, this really ambitious plan. It was one of the major reasons why Wilson got elected and had a lot of attention during the campaign. He came out and said, we are going to end unsheltered homelessness by December of this year, 2025. How does this budget factor into this plan?
Yeah, it's a big piece of it. So Wilson is confident that he won't need any city dollars to fund his plan. A reminder, this plan costs around $25 million. It was initially $28 million, but that price tag has shrunk a little bit. He's been working really hard to collect funding from outside sources, namely other governments. For his plan, he's counting on $15 million from Metro Council, which has already voted to approve that money, and then he expects the other $10 million to come from the state. It's worth noting that none of the state money is guaranteed. State lawmakers have not really put forward a spending package for this yet, and the session's still in session. So that's a bit up in the air still.
And the shelter plan is one of these really ambitious plans that Wilson has. How does he plan to pay for this and his other initiatives?
Yeah, well, like I said, he's really leaning on other governments' money, at least for the shelter plan and for other pieces of the city's budget. But I mentioned the cuts he's proposing in general, $26 million. You'll notice that doesn't cover the $65 million shortfall. He's also looking to the city's reserves or rainy day funds to backfill the budget. And he's proposing to increase some fees like parking meters and park facilities to make a bit more revenue to fill that gap. Also, raising fees on rideshare and Airbnb. Notably, he's tapping tens of millions of dollars in money that's considered one-time or short-term, kind of like the ARPA money, essentially money that disappears after a year without a plan for new revenue. Using that kind of money is partially how the city got into the budget crisis to begin with. I should note, that his shelter plan is one of those things that is completely funded with one-time money, since neither Metro nor the state has guaranteed more money next year.
Are there any concerns about you using funding in this way and picking from those pots of money. Like, what have you heard from, I don't know, city councilors this week about it?
I'd say that's their biggest concern.
Right.
We got a peek yesterday when the mayor presented his budget to council, and they had like 7 minutes each to kind of give feedback. The biggest thing we heard was that why are we using one-time funding again to patch these gaps? Because it just means we're going to have the same conversation and kind of existential crisis next budget season. So they're pretty stressed about it. They're also, more specifically, they're annoyed by kind of where he's looking to make cuts. Parks maintenance, a lot of councilors care deeply about our beautiful parks in Portland. And I'm already hearing some proposals that councilors are wanting to put forward to prevent those cuts and grab money from other areas instead. One just kind of offhand proposal that stands out to me is coming from Councilor Steve Novick. He wants to cut the police bureau's budget, which is a pretty big one, by replacing some armed police officers with unarmed responders. It's a position that already exists, and those folks get paid a lot less. And these unarmed folks would show up to more low-level calls that police don't necessarily already show up for. But, proposing cuts to police staffing is a historically divisive issue. So I expect some more fireworks when we get closer to the budget cycle.
Mm-hmm. And let's stick with the city council for a second. This will be the first time that leaders in this new Portland city government will try to pass a budget. You've been covering this new form of government a lot. What are your expectations for them?
It's going to be messy. There's a lot of newness. For example, in the past, the mayor proposed the budget and councilors put forward their own amendments that had to be balanced, not make more holes in the budget by proposing things. This year, councilors can just kind of propose random adds and cuts that aren't balanced, and then it's up to the chair of the city's finance committee to figure out how to balance it. It's a weirdly new power. So there's lots of new ways of doing things. At the same time, we have a lot of new councilors who just aren't familiar with city budgets or what to look out for, which I honestly see as a positive, since it means the budget office may have to slow down and walk through some of the more complex things. But I think in general, it's going to be clunky. It's going to be humbling. I was chatting with one city councilor's chief of staff yesterday who was just like, I think we're all looking forward to next year when we'll have figured out all the problems and the chaos of this year's process. So a lot to look out for.
And you've reported also in the past about, was it the public comment periods for the city council have been really kind of laborious and tedious in a way, right?
Yeah, and they're making a lot of time for that in this budget process as well. Yesterday we had the first kind of budget response from members of the public, and it was supposed to be an hour. It went a little bit long. I think we're going to see a lot of that in the next few weeks.
Mm-hmm. And like we said, this is essentially the first major proposal for Mayor Wilson, and it will set the course for the city for the next year. What could this budget mean for his agenda just down the line? How pivotal is this for him?
Yeah, a couple thoughts. Wilson's top priority is to show voters that he's going to follow through on his shelter plan, right? So I think if he's able to get the money to open up these beds, that will be considered a win for him. At the same time, there are a lot of folks, a lot of homeless advocates who argue that his plan is not going to solve unsheltered homelessness, that it'll just remove people from public eye temporarily and they'll cycle back out. So it's one thing for him to pay for the shelter beds. It's another thing if it actually helps move people off the streets for the long term. So I think evidence will be seen just looking on the sidewalk in your neighborhood. I do think people are going to be disappointed if he doesn't work on finding ongoing funding, like we were mentioning, for a lot of the city programs that are propped up with this short-term dollars. I want to be fair also, though, in acknowledging that he's only been in the city digging through the budget for 4 months. So it's hard to blame him for not immediately solving the problems of previous administrations. I think the next budget will be a real litmus test for him. Was he able to turn city revenue around? Was he able to really solve these inefficiencies that he always points out to in the city? Time will tell.
Well, Alex, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Bryce.
This week's episode of OPB Politics Now was recorded in the Gert Boyle studio. It was produced by Andrew Thien, and our audio engineer is Naleen Silva. Our music comes from Audio Network. In these uncertain times, we are certain that you have questions about local politics. Maybe we can answer them. We would love to hear from you. Email us at opbpoliticsnow@opb.org. We'll be back next week with more political news from across the Pacific Northwest. Until then, you can find all of OPB's reporting at opb.org. Thanks for your support, and thanks for listening.